Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. Today I thought we'd have a go at answering a question that pops up quite a lot on the internet, whether it be Facebook forums or Reddit or wherever you guys hang out. And that is, what should I go for as a first airsoft rifle? Now, to answer that question, I'm going to make a few assumptions. Assumption number one being that if you're looking for your first rifle, then more than likely you are a fairly new player to the sport. And as such, you're probably going to want something within a certain budget. So for the purpose of this video, we're going to look at guns under £200. You're going to want something fairly versatile. And again, with that in mind, I'm actually going to go for rifles or carbines. And the reason for that being that you can take them anywhere and they'll perform fairly well. They're not a DMR, you're not going to have massive range with them. They're not a submachine gun that is best used in CQB. They're somewhere in the middle, and as such, they're pretty much the bread and butter of the sport. And the military, let's face it. So, and we're going to go with AEGs because reliability, ease of use, and ease of maintenance as well. Once we start stepping into the realms of gas and HPA guns, things become a lot more complicated in terms of use and maintenance. So for this video, we're going to steer away from those. Now, what I've got behind me today is actually a choice of 3 in various categories. One being an M4, one being an AK, and one being a G36. And these really form the starter Pokemon, if you like, of the airsoft world, which I suppose to all intents and purposes makes me your Professor Oak for today. Now, starting with the most obvious, we have the M4. And this one is actually a G&G Combat Master or a CM16 Raider. And this is a gun you've more than likely come across and maybe not even paid any attention to it. And that's because 99% of the time, these are the rentals on any airsoft field you go to. And there's a reason for that. They're hugely reliable, they have great build quality, and they're only £150. And that's, usually with shipping and everything as well. So they represent fantastic value for money. And as an M4 platform, they represent a great deal of versatility as well. Obviously, you have a multi-positional stock, so you can shorten it down really tight for those CQB environments or lengthen it out when you're trying to take the longer shots. We have a 14mm counterclockwise thread at the end, so we can have tracers, suppressors, whatever you want to upgrade it with later on. And we have a massive real estate at the top for any optics you want to run. Now on that note, the CM16s tend to have fairly good iron sights, and the Raider is no exception. These will see you right for a long time without the need to actually purchase anything in terms of a red dot or a holographic or anything that you're going to go for later on. It utilizes standard AR style mags or Stanang mags, and the G&G range is particularly good for taking any mags you throw at it, really. I've never found a problem in terms of mag compatibility with the G&G range. So this really represents great value for money. And I know it doesn't look all fanciful in this guise, but it's a real workhorse and something really worth investing in. It comes with a Gen 2 gearbox, so there are a host of upgrades available for it. If you do particularly fall in love with your Raider at a later date, you can go through a plethora of upgrades with no problems at all. The rail's good on these, some of the range in the G&G range, if you start stepping up the price value, as I said, this comes in at 150. The range goes all the way up, you know, past 200 to the 300 range. And you can get a multitude of different stocks. You can get different rail systems at the front. You can run more expensive G&G mags that have sort of grips around, a gripped texture around it, so you can grip the rifle like that as opposed to C-clamping it. You get different pistol grips and controls, etc. The one downside to the Combat Master or the Raider is it is not ambidextrous controls. You do get that further up the range, and maybe that's something to consider, but as a first gun, you can't go wrong with an M4 and you can't go wrong with a Combat Master. On the point about different guns and different prices as well, I actually also have the Raider L, which, as you can see, is significantly cleaner than the standard Raider because it hasn't seen as much use at the minute. This is a fairly new acquisition that I got just before lockdown, actually, so it's not actually seen any game time. Now, the L, the only difference being is the extra 10 centimeters in the barrel at the front. That's it. And yet the L comes in at £135, so represents even greater value for money in that respect. With a longer barrel, you could argue that there's a chance that it has better velocity, certainly ever so slightly more accurate at longer ranges, but it's not something you're going to notice to that great extent. Being slightly longer, the L might not be the ideal weapon for CQB, but again, I've seen people use longer rifles in CQB with very little problem. I have on several occasions. It's something you can work around. It's not a big deal. And for £15 less, it represents great value for money. So that's my recommendation for the M4s. Now, moving on to the AKs, we have a slightly different brand I would go for. If you're looking for a good value AK-47, you can't go wrong with a CYMA. CYMA. Some say CYMA. I say CYMA. Potato, potato. Now, this is my AK, obviously. I've used this quite a lot. I absolutely adore it. It is still classed as a starter rifle. You still have the windable 300 plus mag to be found. You have a retractable stock on this one and a very nice all polymer handguard, and these come in at just shy of 200, so we're still in that range but significantly more expensive than the M4. And unfortunately with AKs you're going to see a bit more investment in terms of potential accessorizing. So what I mean by that is, as you can see, most AKs at this value anyway don't come with Picatinny rails across the top. You'll be stuck just using the standard and traditional AK style sights. They're not bad, they're not fantastic by any stretch of the imagination. So what you will actually have to contemplate doing is purchasing one of these side mounts as well, which then provide you with some Picatinny space at the top, which, as you can see, I've tarted this rifle up somewhat with a scope and canted sight, because what's cooler than a canted sight? And this is what I would call an example of your ability to change up a gun's look fairly dramatically with its accessories. So just because it's a starter rifle, when you look again at the M4, obviously we see something that is very basic in its design, perhaps doesn't look all that tactical, but with some minor investment anything can be made to look cooler. So don't worry too much about that. Now, in terms of looks, CYMA actually produce a wide array of AKs, all coming in different styles and sizes, and a lot of them still coming in under this £200 budget that we've set. Some come with like a faux wood effect, which is perhaps more traditional when you think in terms of an AK-47, and it's really down to choice. While I recommended the Raider specifically from the G&G range, I'm not going to recommend a particular AK from the CYMA range, because internally they're all very similar under this £200 price bracket, and it does really come down to the aesthetics that you're looking for as to what you want. Again, like I say, as previously mentioned, if you are going to go the AK route, it's probably worth giving some thought to any future investment you're going to have to make and budgeting accordingly for that. By that I mean obviously the potential side mounts, etc. And magazines as well. While an M4 platform style gun is going to run standard AR-15 style rounds, magazines, sorry, Stanang mags as they're more commonly called, you're going to get a load of people on the field who can chuck you a spare mag if you're running low. With the AKs, you're probably not likely to find too many people running an AK on any given day. There might be one other guy on your team. Maybe there'll be 3 people at the event in total. Who knows? They're not always going to be widely available. You're going to want spare magazines. Even with a 300 round capacity, it's got a quick fill window, but in the heat of the moment, chucking another mag in is always preferable. So you may have to invest in another couple of mags, and like I say, the adapter for the Picatinny mount. So that's something to consider. Now, on to the G36, which I find to be a bit of a Marmite gun in some people's eyes. I personally quite like the looks of the G36. I think it looks quite, perhaps futuristic is the wrong word, but certainly it looks like an aesthetic upgrade from your standard M4. And there are a wide selection of very good G36Cs, which is what this is. You can get G36Ks as well, which are slightly longer barreled. They would make better long range weapons. They're going to make tragic CQB weapons. So stick with the C if possible. And the C, obviously, as with all G36s, has a folding stock to make it even shorter for ultra tight scenarios. Now, as I was previously mentioning, there are a lot of very good 36Cs out on the market for under £200. Perhaps the best firing ones come from Ares. Maybe the best value for money might come from Jingong or JG. And that's because the Jingong ones 95% of the time will be supplied with a battery and a trickle charger, which is something obviously when you're making any airsoft purchase you need to consider a battery for as well. Now, this one is actually from Specna Arms and is somewhat of a dark horse, because this is by far the cheapest G36C you can buy on the market. This comes in at a rather astounding $119.99 and is fantastic value for money, because in terms of the gearbox, it's identical to any other G36 gearbox you're going to find in this price range. Where they've skimped out perhaps is ever so slightly build quality. This does have a certain wobble and feel to the front section. Everything else is generally good, but I get the feeling from it, it wouldn't want to be wrapped around a tree or dropped too often. That being said, this is a blowback as well, and it's classed as an EBB or electric blowback, and actually cycles the charging handle forward and backward during firing. And that's something you're not going to find on either of the other two guns mentioned today, and probably not going to find on any gun under £200. But this gives you a fair few smiles per mile, shall we say, and certainly adds a feeling of, I wouldn't say quality, but fun, maybe, to the airsoft game. I'm sure most of you have come across EBBs in the past, seen how they work and how they perform, and this is no exception really. This is quite a good feeling EBB. It's not too weak. It cycles with every shot, so the realism is there, and it's a nice feeling weapon. And again, a simple optic. This is actually just a very cheap optic from Amazon, and I think came in at about £25 actually. So the whole setup is going to cost you about the same as the M4, but you're going to get an electric blowback gun and an ACOG style sight. Fantastic value for money. And as I say, this is the Specna Arms model. They also do an EBB in a G36K if you want something slightly longer, and is my recommendation for the G36 range. As I say, there are others out there that represent fantastic value as well, Aries and Jingong to name but a few. So take a look around, see what you'd like before you buy. This has been your guide to the M4, AK-47 and G36 models, and I hope it's been of some interest and some help to you in your future purchases. If you've enjoyed the content, it would be fantastic if you could take the time to subscribe below, and leave a like is always appreciated. Thank you very much.